Hello from all of us here at the Men's Development Network and also from the team across the road in Garter Lane. We're delighted you're able to join us here for this, our webinar for International Men's Health Week. And I have along with me some really lovely friends today who are going to help us to celebrate through poetry, reflecting on men's lives in a creative and I hope expansive way. In a few moments' time, we'll head off into the land of, I suppose, rhyme. But before that, a few words of welcome to different people. One of our colleagues has disappeared very humbly off the screen. He was sitting there a few moments ago in front of the Men's Development Network, and that's Mark Khan. He's just come back to us there just to wave at us.
Like
and Mark is the Engage National Men's Health Training Programme Coordinator. Most importantly today, he's our moderator, and he's going to make sure that we don't press buttons that disappear people virtually. So that's a really important role that he has today, and I welcome him along to be here with us today. We also have, of course, Derek Corcoran here, who's representing Garter Lane and the Arts Centre, and he'll be sharing with us his ideas and thoughts along the way as well. And of course, we have the wonderful poet. We have Fergus Hogan and his beautiful book, Bitter and Cry, which has been acclaimed, and many other pieces of writing that he's done as well. Fergus, thank you for giving up your time to be here with us today. And of course, then, a Wexford man in exile, we have Micheál Kavanagh from the Deise Men's Shed, who is very much part of the creative aspects of what they do outside in relation to many different initiatives within their shed. Look at folks, it's a really challenging time on our island in Ireland. We have COVID-19. A lot of people have been deeply impacted by it and affected by it. It's in the context of that Men's Health Week arrives this year. It's an international event, and across the world, a lot of people support it and celebrate it and try and mark it as an opportunity for us as men to look at the broader and also the specific aspects of our health and our well-being. So today we decided that we might do something slightly differently, and we might do this webinar, which of course is called Seeing Through the Eyes of the Heart. And the idea is that we would look at men's lives through the creative and the expressive areas. And if one thing COVID-19 has taught us, among many things, and we're still learning the lessons, is that it also gives us in a nation an opportunity to provide a kind of creative response and a generous response. And across our nation, so many people have stood in the gate for us to celebrate and use their gifts and their talents in really, really important ways to make sure that we stay well and indeed that we are well. So we thank everybody who's part of that response, and we celebrate and we mark that especially. So for more information around Men's Health Week as well, you see the banner up there, mhfi.org is where you go to, mhfi.org. It's a one-stop shop. There's a lot of really good information there in relation to Men's Health Week, and you'll find anything you need to know in relation to getting more involved in the week. It's a virtual week, so we're asking people just to raise awareness through using the Twitters and the Facebooks and all the different platforms, and you can go in there and you can find information that you can grab and go with around the key themes for the week, and I really would recommend that to you as well. This day and this week also gives us an opportunity to celebrate, I suppose, the broad diversities of masculinity. So we welcome all of us as men in the very different ways that we are all different in the world, and I think that's really, really important as well. In the Men's Development Network, I've been there for nearly 17, 18 years now, and across the years we've celebrated the diversity of men, and we've celebrated the creative aspects of our lives in many different ways. And a lot of the men that we know and have worked with and come to love and meet and supported, and who have supported us indeed, have a deep love of song and poetry and creativity and getting involved with their hands and learning new skills. And we have been part of the celebration of that across those many years where we've worked with men. So today's format, we're going to celebrate all of that very simply. And we hope you're relaxing where you are. It's a lunchtime gig. And we hope you can sit back and maybe with an open heart and an open door, allow in some of the words and some of the images that hopefully will celebrate the kindness and the goodness and the questioning and the joy and the challenges of being a man in the 21st century. And we thank you for coming on board and being with us for this event in a very simple format that we're presenting for you. So the way we're going to do it is very simple. We're going to invite Fergus to read some of his lovely poetry. I hope to share some of my own poetry as well along the way, and we'll have a discussion then with our panel in relation to maybe some of the themes that we've brought to the fore. Also, we're going to have our chat bar there, and our chat bar is for yourselves when we break in and have a conversation at the end, to please join us with your observations, or you may have some questions. And between Mark and myself, we'll be able to bring some of those questions to our panel that we have here So I'm going to just share the screen with you. Hopefully this will work for us. We haven't tried this. We have our poems here somewhere. So we're going to go and let's give us 1 second. Thank you for bearing with us. Put that off our screen. Now, thank you for staying there. And as I was saying, it's seeing through the eyes of the heart that we're here for today. And here's International Men's Health Week that we have up on our banner. And I'm saying to you once again to go to mhfi.org. It's a really lovely place to start if you want to find out more about Men's Health Week. These are our guests that we have along. You know a little bit about them now. We didn't use it as such. And we're going to go up here for a few moments. And this will be available afterwards. If you're interested in having it as a PDF, we can send it out. One of the things I just want to draw to our attention, I've said it in some format already, I suppose, it's a very simple thing that for many of us, the creative life sometimes can be away from us rather than a part of us. And I know when I was 17 years of age and started to write myself in secondary school, I think I was one of very few in a very large school who was doing that. So it did feel a little bit different to be setting out on a journey in relation to writing and the creative arts. But for all of us, these things that you see on your screen at the moment, the arts, prayer, meditation, music, friendship, support, poetry, journaling, these can be really elemental in the ways that we mind our health, that we mind our well-being, and that we live in the world in a flourishing kind of way. And you know what's really important for all of us here today, a few questions that we might ponder as we sit through our lunchtime together. Worth reflecting on this question: where in your own life do you have, what do I enjoy doing that adds purpose or meaning to my life now? Purpose and meaning are really, really important things to have. And it's really worth reflecting on some of those things that maybe we could have in our lives that would support us in relation to minding our health and minding our well-being as we go into the days ahead, especially. Seamus Heaney famously said, "I rhyme to see myself, to set the darkness echoing." And D.H. Lawrence, the lovely writer who wrote many fine books as well, he talked about the idea for himself of one sheds one's sickness in our books. So that's bringing us up to the start of our lunchtime invitation to bring on to our screens the lovely poet Fergus Hogan and the lovely man who I've known across the years. Fergus has worked in Waterford for a good number of years. He lectures in narrative family therapy and social care and practice in the Waterford Institute of Technology. But he's also a poet, and he's been published in many different forums. And back in 2018, he actually won the spoken word competition for his beautiful and strong poem, Consent, which was the first time out. So it was great that happened for him. Bitter and Cry is a beautiful, beautiful collection of poems, and I recommend that you look for it if you don't have it already. But I'm going to invite Fergus, especially now, just to lead us into our lunchtime by reflecting through poetry some of his own experience of living creatively in the world and what that means for him.
Garmila Mahagov Lorcan, August Tafalchov, Stacks a kitchen today. Friends, you're all welcome into our kitchen today, and it's just lovely to share this Men's Day together, Men's Health Day, and through creativity. Lorcan, I could listen to you all day long talk about how, as men, we need each other and we support each other, and I certainly know my life. Men have saved my life, and men's groups and men's development network, and sitting in circles with men and women, but it's been men that have steadied me and helped me when I've fallen out of balance. And I want to honor all of those men and those circles. One of the first men in my life, obviously my dad, but my granddad was a really special man in my life. And he was a plumber. And he was one of the men who had to leave his family quite often so that he could find work and bring home money. But when I was born, he was old enough, he was retired, and he was at home, and he taught me so much about how to live. And so I'm going to begin with this small poem, and it's got my granddad in the heart of it, but it's also today dedicated to all the mentors, all the male mentors in our lives. It's called Map of the Soul. My granddad carried a map in his soul, and it was sensuous. He could tell where I'd been by the smell of the flowers on my clothes. Each evening at tea, when my mother would ask, I'd shrug my shoulders and say, just playing in the garden. He'd shake his head and smile and say, you were down by the woods today. I can smell by the wild garlic off you. And on other days too, he knew by the smell of buttercup pollen. You've been chasing bumblebees and butterflies in the meadow. But when I came home from the ilex tree, having climbed the forbidden high wall, he said nothing at all to give me away. Just later at night, when he'd kiss me for sleep, he'd spend longer and whisper and say, lilac trees remind me of your Nana. A love like that is hard to find in this world. Sometimes in life, you need to go on a great and dangerous adventure. Follow the map in your soul. And that poem's for Grandad and all the mentors. And my granddad, as well as being a plumber, he was a wordsmith. He'd go for rambles on a Saturday afternoon, and he'd come home and he'd sit me on his knee and he'd tell me all about the people he talked into. And I remember my mother used to say, that's not the phrase, you don't talk into people. But I think it is the phrase, that we talk into people and we get to know them by listening. And that's always been my experience of sitting in circle and counsel with men, that we listen. And we listen through our hearts, and we see the world through our hearts. And yeah.
It's really beautiful, Ferguson. What a beautiful poem to start with today. Oh my God, where do you go from there, as I say? But I know where you're going to go, because you have some lovely poems that we were looking at in the last few days. And just to celebrate that and the holding space of the ancestor, and especially the mentor who was the older and the wiser one, and the poetry in his soul, to be able to recognize where you were off on your adventures. Such a beautiful, beautiful start. Would you like to read the next one and give us an explanation as we go?
The Bitter and Cry. Lorcan, you've been very kind about this chapbook, The Bitter and Cry, and it's a small collection of poems, but to share my truth, all of the poems in this collection are written at a time when I really struggled in my own personal life. And Lorcan, you'll know this, we've shared this, but it's a time when as an adult man, I chose to leave a long-term relationship, to leave a family home. I didn't choose to lose contact with my children, but that was one of the unimaginable and unintended consequences. And I really struggled, and I still do. But life moves on for all of us, I pray and hope. And this poem is the title poem. The bittern is a bird that became extinct in Ireland around maybe 100 years ago. It used to be a bird that lived in the boglands and in the rushy fields, and we've changed our agricultural practices. We might change back. And this poem isn't just about the bittern bird. It's not just about all of the animals and wildlife and the ecology of the world that we're decimating, but it's also about all of the things we leave and lose and let go through life, and the hardships, and sometimes because of our own trouble. Bittern cry. A bittern cry echoes across the lake too late, and I wonder why we did the things we did, or let things come to this. Absence holds a presence. I still remember the size of your 6-year-old hand in mine before I let go. There's a time at dusk and dawn each day when the light catches the air and carries birdsong higher, further, deeper. There are times in the dark of night when I still hear you call. Strange how rooms and empty homes hold sounds and voices too. Wood and stone have memory, as earth and water do. The trees round the shore have seen my sins unfold, heard me confess, watched as I wept in the well that my father dug, where I knelt and begged forgiveness. Now, I see you everywhere I turn in the things you left behind, your red Swiss Army knife untouched since the day it cut you deep, paring a blackthorn stick by the fire. A bottle of gone-off sun cream I forgot to use the weekend you burnt raw, and we cried together for nights on end. A tangled mess of fishing rod left thrown in a temper after a day on the water being blown into reeds, casting into rocks and shallows, snagged lines, lost hooks, angry voices carried on thin air. You're not listening to me, I said. You said same. You know, lad, Lorcan, men, one of the things about writing, for me, in writing the poems and over the years of writing these poems, was how they helped me reflect on my own life. You know, I'm not the only man who's gone through a separation and made mistakes like that, and I'm certainly not the only man walking around Waterford or the world missing children or loved ones. But for a long, long time, I carried that as an anger. I blamed everybody else. It was everyone else's fault. And the writing of the poems and the editing of them and the reading of them in small groups and in men's circles helped me begin to realize that my anger was a defense against my pain, and that my blaming of others was actually trying to protect myself or stop myself from realizing I've really to touch into my own feelings of responsibility and vulnerability. And I thank the poems for that surprising turn. And I think sometimes art does that in our lives. It helps us see even our own lives in a different way. Yeah, so.
That's really, again, beautifully put, Fergus. And as I say, I know from our conversations across the years that this has been your journey. And for many people, I also know in writing and in reflection, and as you've said as well, in the company of other people,
yeah,
we can learn our healing. And we can talk into one another, as you say, the healing remedy. And it's so important for men to hear that. There's one more poem I'm going to ask you to read, which is part of this theme, I suppose, of the challenge of your life. That was part of processing the sadness. And then you have some poems around the strength of recovery and finding your gift and your nuance. Can you read the lovely poem that you have? The sad and poignant poem, but a very strong poem.
Yeah,
a beautiful poem.
I'd love to read it.
I know you read it from the space of a new way of being able to sit with your own story, your own life in a very beautiful, powerful way.
Yeah, it's a poem I'd like to read today, particularly because it's Father's Day this weekend, and it's a beautiful time for men and fathers and sons and grandfathers and daughters, and it's also a terribly difficult time for lots of men who are, for whatever reason in their lives, separated from their own children or the children that they love. So this is for all fathers and grandfathers, but it's also particularly for those men who are absent for whatever reason from their children's lives. Father's Day. And I wonder what you do today or on any of the years since we last met. I wonder if you ever stop or think of me the way I always think of you. Or if you ever wake at night as I do all the time in nightmares and a sweat, crying out for you. I wonder if you see the cards in shops that say, Happy Father's Day, or what you say to friends or others who might ask. I wonder if you still hold all the hurt and anger that I caused the day that I walked away. And, you know, I think there's a cost in writing. Sometimes when we write, we have to go back into the pain of the story. But as we were talking about it, going back in, every time we go back into our story, it's different. Every time we tell our story. And that's, for me, the beauty of men listening and sharing. You know, sometimes I need to be challenged into my responsibility, and that's what the men's groups do. But also sometimes I just need, you know, that mentor or friend to stand beside me and say, you know, this will be okay, or this will pass, or don't be so hard on yourself, or and as you said at the very start, Lorcan, we can be those different ways of men together at different times when we need it. So we are blessed in our friendships and our community.
And you say it so well, Fergus, because I say it to all men or any person who will be listening to the story of this, to be able to write and to capture that and to be able to move into the space in the company of other people. I think healing happens in the place of other people. And you're so beautifully say that about the connections that you made and how you found the supports that you needed to come to that place.
But you know, Lorcan, to carry these kind of stories, separation, you know, I don't think we've yet come to realize how do we hold a family or the needs of people when we divorce or separate in Ireland. You know, not just men, but women and children too. But to carry these stories, it's too heavy. You know, we know that. We know that these stories of shame and guilt and trauma and wrongdoing, whether we've done the wrong or it's been done to us, they're too heavy to carry in silence. And sometimes we write things and they're very private. You know, we journal and we write, but to be able to read them is that reconnection, that communion with other, and bringing us back out of ourselves. And yeah, so it's the writing, but it's also the sharing. And yeah, you're right, Lorcan. It's a lovely way that you put it.
I'm going to ask you to go ahead, yeah. Just
I find you're extremely brave. That's the rawness and the clarity of what you're explaining is just fantastic. It really is. When we were doing these poems the other day, I was actually overwhelmed by just the sincerity, and especially with the context. But it's a very brave thing you're doing, because you are standing naked with emotionally. You know, it's fantastic. So brilliant, well done.
Gormahagat Mihal. It's a thing I've learned through sitting in groups, and I keep saying it about the groups, you know, whether it's the Men's Development Network or Council, or with men in the countryside, or drumming circle, or even in silent meditation, that our vulnerability is our strength. And every time any of us, men, women, children, share a story, you know, we've no idea of the ripple effect and how it touches us. You know, your story touches me in ways that you mightn't understand or know, but it is healing. And, you know, the wise ones used to say that we tell stories and we read poems and sing songs to get us ready for the future that we don't yet know is coming to us, you know, so we should really listen to each other more carefully. But thank you, Michal. Standing in my nakedness is in the kitchen. It's okay with you guys.
and our participants.
And our participants.
Can I just stay with where you're going? And we're going to read another few poems, and we were going to open up to our panel and whatever, but the time is going so fast, and this is so lovely to hear your work. And I just want you to read the next poem first, because we're saying about where we find the restoration of ourselves. And that's really important, restoring the balance we're talking about here today in relation to men's health and well-being.
Yeah.
And so I just love this poem, and these two poems that we'll have from you, just around finding that and restoring that balance, and the other places we find it outside of our conversations and our relationships, our favorite spaces and places. So I'd love you to read this as well.
Well, nature is such a grounding place for me, and Irish mythology, nature. I guess the three things that stabilized me were men's support, a sense of spirituality, and I don't just mean a church-based spirituality, but kind of a running God that you might find in the mountains or waterfalls or in forests. So, nature revisited. When I fall from grace, the truth of my being, out of the story I imagined as real for myself, I return to nature. Between woods and water, I sit by the shoreline in silent retreat. I watch the sun rise and I watch the sun fall. I watch all the colours of the sky pass by. I make friends with the elements and the weather. I welcome the wind and the rain and the sun. I pray to each one, giving thanks for their gifts. Blow these idle thoughts from me, wash away my sins, burn new life and love and light deep into my bones. Here, I am renewed in communion with nature. Here, I talk with the mink and the heron who come to visit a while, with the birds and the trees and the stones at the water's edge, and the trees and the water too, bearing witness till the end of the day when the lake swaps the moon for the sun and the stars up above dance with crayfish below. And I realize in this perfect union, nothing is asked for and nothing is taken. We breathe and live and let go, always together as one.
Wow.
And I might finish with one real short one if I have time, Lorcan.
You have time? Is it Crow Magic, would it be?
Crow Magic. And it is what it is. Crow Magic. Now I feed my worries to the crows. Having learned how to live in nature's cycles, I plant my troubles and seeds that I've gathered in warmer times. I place them on branches, cracks and crevices of dead old trees and hidden thin spaces that miss the company of birds and song. A gift from me to them, and they come. Black-feathered, black-winged, black-beaked, sharp-tongued, they descend in raucous morning and take them all away from me transmuted. My beautiful flock of silver-eyed friends, my funeral of sin-eaters.
Thank you very, very much, Fergus. It's just so beautiful. And as we were lucky to have a practice run the other day for our webinar today, folks, if you're there with us. And we had the joy of hearing these amazing poems as well. in that small circle that we gathered in the other day. It was absolutely gorgeous. Just to say again, in relation to this webinar, it's a first time out in relation to, I suppose, promoting the creative aspects online for us. So we're learning as we go as well. But I hope that you're hearing the sound and the tone of what it is that the creative process can mean in our lives, and especially in relation for us as men. And thank you, Fergus, for sharing with us some of your own magic. Forget the crow magic for a moment. Just your own magic of being able to go and bring back the story of your life through the supports you have received and through the places where you find your supports, to be able to help us see the visible story of challenge and setback, and yet to be able to come through it and be part of living a flourishing and a sharing life as you are here with us today. There's just a few poems before we go to our panel I wanted to bring along here today as well. And some years ago, we have a summer school, a National Men's Health Training summer school every year. And many of our men come from all over the country, and we sit in circles. We sit in large circles and small circles. We create a very safe environment. We create a space where we can talk and listen to each other's lives and allow our own lives to speak to us. And we do that in a really safe and appropriate way. And at that summer school, we asked men who had never really written that much at all or picked up a pen to rhyme, to write some reflections. And we asked them to just start with that first line, "Since coming here today." And I'm just sharing a few thoughts from those men who had never really written before, to show that the creative process, and especially creative writing, does not have to be about something that we thought was not for us. It can be anybody with a pen who's willing to sit down and sit and allow their heart to speak. One man wrote this: "Since coming here to your company, I have been reminded yet again how all men need this space, how young boys playing with their toys must learn early feeling words to play with, to try out their sounds and shapes, that one day young boys becoming older boys and older men will know the conscious difference between thinking and feeling, and live fuller, richer lives from the gift of both." Beautiful. Just another little one I'll share as well, a few of them. Another man said, "Since coming here, I have delighted in the presence of men, listening to their heartfelt, honest stories and sharings. I have been reminded again of the power of men safe in a circle, talking their lives. Since coming here, my tiredness is lifted. Tiredness that is the fear of being alone as a man with no other men to listen. Since coming here, I am surrounded with hope that more men might sit in circles and plan their lives not from strategies thought out from their heads, but from the revealing and discerning of their freed up hearts and spirits." Just the last one I'd like to read was at the end of the 2.5 days we've been together. One of the men had written this, and he hadn't written that much at all in his life. And he was delighted that he was able to pen this. And it's one of my favorite pieces of writing because it's linked to memory, and it's linked to the memory of men in a circle, sharing and supporting each other to live well in the world, to become our best selves. "Least we forget, 20 men spent 2 days together. Each one had the opportunity to tell their story and hear 20 stories and be heard by 20 men. This is mighty work. Its impact on our lives is mighty. Being heard by one is significant. Being heard by 20 different men of different backgrounds, ages, classes, upbringing, orientation is mighty. It is this difference that brings the challenge and the power of this way of working. Gratitude." Isn't that lovely?
Lovely, lovely.
It's really lovely, yeah?
Lovely.
Now, I'm just going to share 2 of my own poems, and we're going to go paneling, I think, for a bit of a chat, and we'll come back and finish with some poems, because I want to bring in Derek and I want to bring in Michal, and we want to look at your observations or questions from the chat bar with Mark. But this is one of my favorite poems from my own few poems that I've written, and I like this one because it brings me back to my dad. And you're looking at him on the screen there, and he's looking out at life. He's long gone from the world, but I feel his closeness, and especially when I'm under duress, I talk to him often. And I only came across this photograph a few years ago. Somebody found it and sent it on to the family, and sure, it is precious. It's an heirloom now. But when I was with my dad, we were very close by the time he had passed away. But in my younger days, we did a lot of traveling around. And I remember my first little car, a little red car, and he had been a builder. And we used to go on trips together, and we'd go and look at walls and churches and graveyards and all kinds of things just to be together. We'd find reasons to spend time in each other's company. We liked each other very well. And I appreciate that gift that I was given, because it doesn't always work out for us as men that we have that relationship with our dad. That doesn't happen always, as we know. Loads of people don't know that. So in the context of this, I suppose, I just wanted to say that my dad has passed from the world, but it's a beautiful poem, and I see this as a poem of resurrection and light and love. And the memory of it is just stronger than the memory, because it actually informs in some way the way I live in the world still, I hope today. A tribute to my father at a wall in Kilquiggan. Recently, the cold about us, we have set out in search of something never spoken, pretending there are sights to see or fields to climb, and now a wall in a high cold place that leads to nowhere. Together there is mystery unsolved. We are happy to be about it. Close together, no need for speed in my small car. We climb winding roads to the highest point yet near to the Healy. Here we can go no further, a new height, where average and ordinary are left far below, barely in view. How happy I am on this winter afternoon that something is captured, something never spoken, yet hardly left unsung.
Lovely.
So that's one for my daddy. And the last one I'm going to read for the moment is one for my son. He's 17 years young now. This is a photograph of him being cool as a very small young man on our Holliers. And it's just called Braveheart. And he has a brave heart for loads of reasons that I won't go into here. But he's a lovely young man growing up. And I remember when Oisin was very small, and I remember going up one night and the light was on the landing and he was asleep in his cot. And I remember going in and holding the cot and looking in at him. And this was the poem I wrote sitting on the stairs when I came back out. My small son is sleeping. The strawberry mark of birth high on his forehead rises to light shadow, wishing to be kissed clean as bright powder. Dry warm smell of bath and love and a day's food seep from his rested breath. Play behind him, toys and colours scatter to the edge of consciousness, and new worlds beyond my grasp or imagining, emerging in the first kaleidoscopic score of dreams. I rest at cot's end, touching the realness of babyhood, staring into the changing dark, trying to focus on the shininess of his special presence, trying to imagine a time when he was not the heart song in all that is good in who I am. That's for Oisin.
Good.
Now, thank you for bearing with us. I'm going to stop sharing the screen and bring these lovely people in that I had with me there a while ago as well. And Mark, if you'd like to come back to us, you're more than welcome. You can appear. You do that thing you do so well.
Like a ghost. It's not October, but...
So we have our chat bar there and people are talking to us along the way. Mark, you've been looking at that. I haven't had a chance to look at it. Before we go there, I just want to welcome again Derry Corcoran, and I want to welcome Micheál Kavanagh. You haven't had a chance to say much already, but we're going to bring in immediately your initial reactions, Derek. Your Garter Lane, we'll ask you about the Garter Lane in a moment, but your initial reactions just to Fergus and his poems. And
Yeah. First off, just to say thanks to you, Lurkin. It was lovely. Like Fergus said, you could listen to your voice all day. It's great. I'm happy to sit back and I have a big smile on my face listening to all this. Especially you guys, you know, the brutal honesty, Fergus, that you've given us through the poems. It's obviously from the heart. And as you said, it's the sharing is the healing. You know, it's lovely to see that. And I can see as well from that sharing and that healing, there's like you've got a hunger for it. It's an appetite for healing almost. You know, each time you share it, you must get that healing through it. And it's lovely. And the same with you, Lurkin, to share it. And it's lovely to be, I suppose you feel kind of honoured to be welcomed into such, I suppose, it's very personal, you know, very personal. So it's lovely. It's really, really nice. So thanks, lads, for sharing such amazing, your hearts, really, sharing your hearts, you know, really, really strong stuff.
Okay, well, now, for yourself, so Derek, you're part of sharing the heart of the nation, because over in Garter Lane as your team, you do super work in relation to bringing the arts to a broad demographic of people. And we've often chatted on the street about such things as, you know, the footfall in men, and how can we, you know, restoring the balance as our team for today, and the invitation of, you know, what works in your own experience, or what might work better if we were to, you know, invite more of us as men to feel that it's not something over there for other people, but the arts and the creative aspects of our lives and the spiritual aspects of our lives belong to all of us.
Yeah, yeah. And like, men make up about, and have done, we're increasing at the moment, about 26% of our audience. That's our audience online and our audience as well to our theatre. So we have, you know, there's a smaller section of the community that partake, but it's very open to them as well. So I remember looking at the window, actually looking about, because we can see Men's Development Centre from where we are, the geography of it. We're in O'Connell Street. And looking at the window there about a year, I think it was March 2019, and saying, right, composing an email with you know, an open call. We have so much in common, and how can we identify what we have in common? Like we put on. I find men love an audience. It's a lot harder for men to engage and share. That's the trick. That's sometimes difficulty. They'll come and see films. We have some beautiful theatre that we've had all year. We've had some great audiences, men, and you can see them sometimes. Maybe the older man was with the wife and is a little bit lost going into the theatre, you know, or into the gallery. They don't feel as, I don't know, as welcome to the arts. It's more of a sporting thing, or a solitary walk, or you know, they love the audience and just watching from the distance. But we would love, obviously, to engage more with the, you know, get like we did with the men's sheds there. They came in here into a small garden. I was amazed. From that call out, a couple of months later, we had nearly 20 guys at the back, you know, digging, clearing the garden, getting everything ready, skip organized, just great coming together, but with a purpose, you know, loving that purpose. So that's one thing that stuck out to me, that purpose. They'll all come if you have a certain purpose, you know.
Okay, and Micheál Kavanagh, speaking of men's sheds, the Deise Men's Shed is a very great group of men out there. And I mean, again, not to narrow the arts or the creative aspects of our lives just into writing or poetry or painting. You're part of a group of men out there who do fantastically creative initiatives, and you've been part of it. You've seen it firsthand with men learning new things, trying new skills, you know.
Yeah, and it's an amazing group. I was taken aback by it, because I joined it the day I retired at the beginning of September 2 years ago. And very, very similar to the poem that the man wrote about the 20 men, like all different backgrounds. There was one man in it who I knew previously, but all different backgrounds, different age groups, different, fantastic skill set, and the sincerity and the honesty of those men working together. Like, no matter what job is going on, there is a spectrum of skills available as a group, and everybody is very willing to suggest a way of doing it better without being judgmental. And there's a great safeness in a group of men, which I hadn't experienced before. I worked as a teacher with an all-female staff, very good people, but this was a totally new experience for me. And look, when you asked me to get involved in this webinar, I was assuming it was just generally about men's things generally. And I got a shock earlier in the week when the email came and it said poetry event. I said, who's sending me an email about poetry event? And I opened it and said, oh, holy mother. So I left my wife and said, this is a poetry event I'm going to have. She said, you know nothing about poetry. I said, I know. Because even your bitter cry, immediately I was lamenting the lament for Thomas MacDonagh and my hard times in 98 doing for the Leaving Cert. But I must admit, the couple of sessions we've had, I've absolutely changed my view of poetry. I always saw poetry as a source of problems, that you had to work this out, you had to work that out. Why were the weeds and wheels long and lovely and lush? Work it out. Whereas for the first time in my life, hearing both of you explain your poems beforehand, I suddenly realised that poetry is a solution. It's not a problem. It was always presented to me as you had to solve this, and like I have much more mathematical background. I'd much prefer to find out the volume of a Grecian urn rather than write an ode about it. But I must admit, after our first chat, I walked away absolutely on a high. I thought it was fantastic. As I said earlier, I just couldn't stop after you read your poem of both your poems. And they're very, very personal things. And I never appreciated that most of these poems are written out of a sense of need, that you, like as you were saying, Fergus, you just had to get us out there, and that there was a healing in this part of it. So, and I've talked more about poetry in the last week than I have for my leaving cert almost. But it's definitely, I can see that there is huge potential there even for people like myself who wouldn't have been involved in poetry, and just the whole coming together of ideas, which is exactly what the shed does in lots of practical aspects. But really, I think this is a fantastic thing you're doing. So well done.
I just see on the chat bar here, Fergus, one of our participants is saying, like, the question actually is, hi Fergus, do you find your poetry changes with the different seasons and their moods? And then the other observation here from somebody is saying that, the word safety, comes to mind when you hear about poetry. And there's something around that, especially for men, around feeling safe enough to try new things that might feel a little bit outside of our comfort zone.
Yeah. Listening to Micheál there, it'd be lovely if you and me reading our little poems encouraged other guys, because it is as simple as, the way to write, or I guess the way to paint or to garden is to just do it, So if we could encourage each other and support each other in that, Micheál, it'd be just it is wonderful. Do my poems change with the seasons? They do. But the thing I've noticed about seasons, which might sound a little bit strange and crazy, but I don't think it is, there's seasons in my own body, in my own heart. There's the great Irish philosopher and mystic, he passed away a couple of years ago, John Moriarty, has a phrase that says we can walk into a field of sadness and it's all around us, and it's not always of our own making. And some mornings, I bird watch a lot, and some mornings I wake up and there's no birds at all in the garden. And I just wonder, what's that about? It's not dependent on the weather, or is it the humidity, or is it the heaviness, or is it the moon? And I think getting in tune with the seasons outside, but also inside in us, that kind of balance, and accepting that there'll be good days and there'll also be misty days and cloudy days, but that weather in us will pass. This weekend is also, as well as being Father's Day, is also the summer solstice. And reconnecting with that kind of Celtic or pagan or Christian, connecting with the land and realizing this weekend we have the longest light, which is wonderful. But there's also a shadow side to that. The days are going to start get shorter. And I think that happens in our lives. We spend the first half of our life making promises to others, and then something happens, whether it's a crisis or a breakdown or a breakthrough, and we try to spend the second half of our life making promises to ourselves. So the seasons are in us as well. The safety question is a really interesting one, because it's only in the community of listeners that you can develop your safety, and in trying things out and having a circle of men or friends or men and women listen is so supportive. It's crucial, I was thinking about Derek's point about the theatre and the arts and what Garter Lane does for this city. I often leave Garter Lane just shook, and it takes me a long time before I can speak to anyone. I remember leaving after that play, it's a couple of years ago now, but the gallant John Joe, and it just, about an older man's life or his life, and we learn so much through the theatre, the fine arts, the painting. Not all of the people listening in are from Waterford, but we are blessed in Waterford, this city, with the theatre, the arts, the community, and to try and connect more of us as men in there, Derek, is just wonderful. Really great safety net.
Can I just go to Derek on that, because Derek, we've chatted about that as well. you know, for yourself, like you came into a particular role within Garter Lane, and does that open up within yourself as well? Then a completely different, the role that you have is one role, but does it open up your own understanding of the broader aspects of belonging in the arts? And I see questions here coming in. We probably won't have time to address all of them, but even, you know, in relation to us as men, is there something about the fact that we have been spoken out of rather than into, as Fergus was saying, the idea that the arts or the creative aspects of our lives are for us? You know, if we've been brought up to be stoic, you know, and strong and independent, and does that somehow maybe cut us away from the more instinctive or natural parts of ourselves?
Maybe so. In my role, I'm the community employment supervisor, so I kind of look after we have 16 participants at community employment. That's my role. So I'm very. I was never so close to the arts again since I started this role just over 2 years ago. But since then, it's opened up now. I went to art college for a year back in the 90s, late 90s. So I always had a pang for a bit of photography or sketching. I doodle. I was always a doodler, and I always read poetry. I always had a love for poetry, usually the kind of quirky, mad stuff. And obviously lyrics and songs and music down through the years, you know, huge part of my life. Music for me, especially the songs and lyrics of them, were always very big and still are. But yeah, it does bring you closer, like, when you're near it. I've joined a choir since, something I wouldn't have done. It's a lovely expression thing to do, you know, a lovely outlet to, again, the social outlet. But to try and engage more men in theatre is always, I see Shane O'Donnell put up some lovely questions there. How do we engage men more in the theatre and arts? And really, I suppose it's opening the doors and just look, there's a gallery there, come in, have a look around, you'll see what's happening when you do. You know, it's a hard thing to do to engage men in those groups. And like, even if it was a book club, what's happening coming up very shortly, and which people should kind of think about, is, and I find men love this, is the National Heritage Week is coming up from the 15th to 23rd of August. And they're taking a different approach this year. It's more about sharing, which is very like what guys are doing here, but sharing some more of our natural heritage, the storytelling, the customs, you know, that we have, and try and relinquish those. So I'd love to do something around that in Garter Lane, where we bring men together, that they could show us, especially some of the older men, like men's sheds, some of the customs that are disappearing, some of the, and sharing that with the younger men. And yeah, I'd love that.
Mark, would you like to come in? You're keeping an eye on the chat there. Anything that you see that you'd like to ask us?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, you've covered some of it because there aren't as many questions today. Obviously, there's been a lot of positive feeling around sharing your story, Fergus, and to you as well, Lorcan, the different kind of poems. But along with the safety aspect that Michael Dillon talks about, is Anne MacDonald talks about the truth and vulnerability. And I suppose you need that kind of safety in a way to expose your truth and vulnerability. And that's something, I suppose, that, you know, as Shane from Queen's University is telling us there, you know, men are kind of more unlikely to expose themselves to ridicule because there's that more defensive mechanism of stoicism or whatever, you know, and it seems to be a little bit more prevalent maybe in more disadvantaged communities, you know, where there's a kind of you've got to be tougher because life ain't easy, you know? And there's elements of that. So I suppose maybe, is there a question of not just how do we engage men, but how do you create that kind of safety? And maybe, as Shane is saying, are there certain art forms that are considered less feminine than others? Because certainly, you know, you think about going to the theatre or think about going to the opera even more so, that's for posh people, isn't it? You know, I'm involved in an early music festival back here in Cork, kind of baroque music and all that kind of stuff, because I love it. Like my heavy metal, like any young teenager, but there was some real kind of crossover with kind of earlier music like Bach and Mozart, you know. But we brought in a number of people to some of the concert last year, and they were like, that's wonderful, but they were an age group. Normally the age group is way over 50, you know, and it tends to be middle class or even upper class. And these were kind of younger people and you know, not from the highfalutin areas and stuff. And they were like, it's just amazing. But, you know, it just would never, you know, really kind of appeal to them or cross their mind, or should go to this, because there's that kind of stereotype in a way. And I suppose, is it the same way with art forms? And that's what we're asking, what Shane is saying here, is there certain art forms maybe that we could get men into a little bit easier? And the other thing is that the men's sheds, Eamon Duffin asked, would you consider having a writing competition or something for the lads, a little writing? But
yeah, I spelled out, that's Eamon is a member of our shed, so that's something that we might follow up. Eamon is a fantastic musician, and we have one of our members paints full time in the shed. He's up. There's an art room up there, and it was another member was kind of keen that we might start art classes, but yeah, definitely I'll chat to Eamon about them, maybe chat with some of yourselves afterwards again, that if there was any interest at all, I definitely would be in favour, because I for the first time in my life I've seen the potential of poetry, which is a bit late, but better late than never.
Yeah, we're coming tight on the time, and I'm watching that too. I know others are, but there's a couple of things that just really quickly came to my mind. The Imagine Arts Festival is also coming up in Waterford, and one of the things about truth and vulnerability that, Micheál, I think is different to poetry nowadays, since you and I did the Leaving Cert, is that everyone is allowed write in their own accent and their voice. So, for example, writers like Colm Keegan write in a Dublin accent, a working class Dublin accent, you know. Dave Lorden writes in his West Cork accent. Sarah Clancy writes and reads in her Galway Limerick accent. So I think the questions about how do we engage people is allowing people to realize your truth, our truth, is what matters. Each individual story. You know, the work that Anna Jordan does around Waterford, around engaging all sorts of communities and all sorts of ages in the mod words and writing. So there's a real vibrancy in Waterford, but I think it comes down to that everyone is valuable, and everything we say, whether it's a really painful hurt or sadness in our lives, or it's a celebration of who we've become or who we want to become. And in my experience, that question about is there something masculine or feminine about different art forms, when we sit and invite a man to tell his story, whatever age he is, that man never has a difficulty when we listen. And it's, you know, we often say guys, young men and working class men and older men don't talk. I think we're not careful enough to listen often enough. And that's what I've really enjoyed about the Men's Development Network, the Men's Sheds, and today. So to those who've listened in, we wouldn't be here without you. So
it's so lovely. Yeah. And just Fergus, to say that, I was going to come back on part of that, what you were just saying, because in the Men's Development Network over the years, it's the one thing, and Shane O'Donnell has asked that there, and somebody else has just said there, sad reality for us perhaps coping through the pandemic is we use kind of the other stuff rather than the creative arts. We maybe hit the bottle or we hit other things. You know, we go and we find ways of coping that are not healthy or good for us or for other people. We have to be really, really careful around that. And so in the context of that, I mean, this is where I know in the Men's Development Network, over the years, we've been able to create that safety and learn to create that safety. And there is an important aspect to that, how we normalize the way we live our lives. I think for many of us as men, just to be able to normalize and conversationalize our challenges and our setbacks and our joys and our aspirations is a really good thing. And you've said it there, Fergus, so it's really to do with that idea of being able to talk and tell our story, you know, and maybe uninterrupted, somebody to listen to us. And maybe sometimes for the first time in our lives to hear our own voice talking about our own story. One of the things we do in our men's groups, we use I statements. It's very important when we're working in our men's groups. You're not, let's say, all men or you men or me men. You have to say I. So and we mentor each other into that. So it's a really kindly way of supporting a man to stay with his story and the context of it and the context of his heart, and what are the implications of what has happened and how can he be supported to live a flourishing life. We're focused on better lives for men, better lives for all, becoming our best selves. And Men's Health Week, I hope, has been about that as well. Mark, anything else you want to add? Just we're going into the last 4 or 5 minutes. Is there anything you saw in the bar there you were keeping an eye on it that we missed out. Thank you very much for...
Well, of course, it's a great moment to try and sell some copies of the book, because people are wondering where they get a copy of The Bitter and Cry.
Now, I'm not his agent, but it's a beautiful book.
But maybe coming back to Derek just for a minute, in that obviously you've been involved with the Garter Lane, and they do an awful lot of community arts and engaging all kinds of groups from young to old and male and female and mixed. Is there any thoughts you have around the, I suppose, engaging men from a lower socioeconomic or disadvantaged backgrounds? Has there been any tips you've come across? But what I have here is Shane has considered maybe a video storytelling project of men's stories focusing on positive masculine traits. Could be a good one.
We had a group actually during the year, they're ongoing, Red Lead, Billy Cullen, and I think actually Shane O'Donnell would be in contact with Philip Cullen. He had a group of guys with brain injuries that came together and made some videos through the ETB, sponsored by, and they used our theatre down below to put it all together. That was amazing to watch that. That was, again, film is a really strong point. Every Tuesday night we Waterford Film for All have an offering. They pick some of the best films that they think, and they pick some really lovely, critically acclaimed, reflective world films, that you get a very steady audience for, and a very good male turn up for that. Again, it's the audience, they like to, but that's a starting point, so wherever you can identify the gathering of men, I suppose, if we can try and get it out there, there's more lads, there's more to come, there's more to do. But the film is definitely something that men love. And again, the arts, the exhibitions, the gallery is something that men really partake in. But it's harder to get men involved in your book clubs, and that's difficult to bring them together around that, especially with socio-economic. But just for example, last year we had John O'Connor. John Connor's the Ireland's Call. That's the guy from Love Hate and Gangster, Cardboard Gangsters. We were thrilled that day. We had about 6 or 7 male members of the travelling community in the first row of the theatre, and that was one of the biggest highlights for us last year, to have the lads up there, questions and answers, asking John O'Connor up on the stage, talking about, coming from that socio background that, never been in a theatre before, never, but loving it and all about it coming out was completely high. Brilliant. That's if you can get that. It's not worked, guys. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
Well, look, I'm just conscious of our time, folks. We are coming into land, and I just want to share the screen again in a moment, just to go out on the poem and just a little bit of signposting as well. Can I just say, look to everybody here, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Fergus, thank you so much for being so generous with your writing and your life, and sharing it with us, and allowing all of us to walk around in the idea and the lens of restoring the balance. And I would be saying to anybody who's listening here as well today, I'm just going to share the screen just to go as we go out. If I can find the poems again, here they are. Give me a second, please. Don't run away on us yet, please. Because there's just 1 or 2 things just before we go. One thing I suppose is just this. If we to be conscious, I'm really conscious of this as well. And today we did talk about important things, and we shared heartfelt. I'm kicking up through here now. If you give me 1 second, we did share heartfelt stories, and in the context of that, I always say to any person that may be watching or whatever, if we do need support around issues that come up in our lives, sometimes we walk into a door, we watch a movie, we meet somebody, we ask ourselves a question, and now we have to answer it. So it's really important we do get the support that we need. And anything that you've seen here today, we're trying to talk about in the context of being a supportive part of the process for ourselves in minding our health and minding our well-being. So please do that for yourselves and for ourselves as well. We will make this available, the slides and the poems that we have here. We didn't draw on all of them, we just took some of them today. And I would recommend to you to get Bitter and Cry. It's an absolutely beautiful, it's a beautiful, beautiful poem, or beautiful book of poems to have. And there was one poem I was just going to leave us with just before we go out the door and say goodbye to you. And it's just Call Out. And it was for International Men's Health Day last year. It's coming again, and maybe we'll have a conversation with Derek and other people here and see if something we can grow from here as an idea that we could take part in to build on this webinar as well. And call it is just for all of us to be our best selves as men. And I leave you with this, and thank you for joining us today. Call out the new songs, become our better selves, sense the change upon the wind, our chance again to be our brightest light, to be values, quality that can launch a million hearts to joy. Let's dream and act big, big-hearted, loving as we go, remembering the other men who loved, who taught us how to be the good. Lean in, stop working by yourself. See how light this is to live together. Here now, stand beside me, look me in the eye with gentle trust. On the count of 3, together, let's begin. Thank you very much. Go safely. We'll see you soon.